Just want to let you guys know and remind you, of course, this episode is presented by PrizePicks. So be sure to hop over to PrizePicks.com today and use their mobile app as well. When you sign up or use their mobile app, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match. All right, we are back. What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Have on with us a very special guest from Sports Talk Indy, Elijah. Elijah, thanks for coming on, man. First time. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited we got to do this. It worked out. Great timing and great timing to be able to produce something together because this is a hot topic right now.
Absolutely, man. And obviously the Indianapolis Colts just finished their final preseason game. So we have a couple more weeks here till the regular season. But Elijah, cut down is Tuesday. So the Indianapolis Colts have some decisions that they are going to make. And we are going to talk about some players who we personally feel like won the preseason for the Indianapolis Colts. So without further ado, we'll jump into it. I'll say this right off the top. We have 9 players, but 8 in total. We have one honorable mention that we're going to mention, but 8 players in total that we're going to talk about here today. Elijah, this was a player actually that you brought up as a player that stood out, and I didn't necessarily see it as much. Of course, I haven't been able to watch a lot of the preseason games. I've had a lot of stuff going on. It feels like every time the Colts have a game in the preseason, I'm not able to watch it, live. So you've got probably a better glance at it than I have, but talk to me about this player we have as our honorable mention here.
So the one that I brought up that I really liked was Tav Bryan. And Tav Bryan, I don't know because there is so much depth. He's a defensive tackle. I don't know if because the Colts have so much depth, if he's going to make it. But I definitely think if anyone has made a case in these top 9 players or 8 players plus an honorable mention, he's had a good preseason. He's had really good, consistent pressure off the line, made some really good tackles. He's just been a really solid. Here's what I'll say about Tav Bryan. If Tav Bryan is on a team that doesn't have the amount of depth the Colts have at defensive tackle, I think Tav Bryan's either a starter or a really good backup defensive tackle. He's had a really good August, and obviously it's preseason, so he's not going up against starters. But from what I've seen from Tav Bryan, I've really, really liked it, and I really hope either a practice squad or whatever for the Colts. But I like Tav Bryan a lot. I think he's definitely been one of those guys that for me has been a stock up in this preseason.
Yeah, and I always have felt like Tav Bryan is more naturally a 3-tech than a 1-tech. I mean, we saw him try to fill in for Grover last year, and that just did not go well for Tav Bryan. So I think he does have a lot more upside, as a 3-tech and, getting after the quarterback and stuff like that. If he's not having to have his primary responsibility be, a run-stopping guy primarily, I think he's a lot better suited for that. But yeah, and I know there's some other young guys that we're going to talk about that might push him off the roster here. But, I mean, having Tav Bryan as just a reserve, defensive lineman, I'm honestly okay with that as long as he's not probably, obviously the first option, maybe not even the second option. But if he's kind of like back into the roster, I think he showed enough, and obviously being a former first-round pick, that there's talent there to tap into, right? So he's got something. He's not the greatest player in the world at the defensive tackle position, but I do think he has something if you needed him to step in at that 3-tech. It wouldn't be nearly as much of a disaster as it was trying to fill in the 1-tech last year. So
absolutely.
So, I mean, Tav Bryan, I think when I've seen him try to get after the quarterback, he's had some success, like you said. And so that's definitely a great thing. I will also add, Elijah, before we kind of get into our top 8, we're not going to really talk about a lot of like the starters right now. We're going to talk primarily about some of these backup guys because, I mean, let's be honest, like before yesterday, the starters in a lot of ways like barely played. Like, it was like two drives, and then this last game it was a quarter and a half. So we've primarily been seeing some guys who are competing for backup positions and honestly just competing for roster spots. I think that's the biggest thing because for the majority of these positions, we already have an idea who are going to be the starting, players. Like we have an idea there. So
Adonai Mitchell's not on the block. Like let's we're not
discussing
that. Yeah.
Right. I was gonna throw Latu on here, but I'm like, I mean, he's looked good, obviously.
Of course he's won the preseason. He's the first defender taken in the draft. Yeah. Like if he's not, we have bigger issues.
Yeah, so he's looked good. We've talked about that in a separate video and all that stuff, but we're going to primarily talk about guys who are fighting for roster spots here in this video. And I think one of those players, especially Elijah, that's been honestly a fan favorite this preseason has been quarterback Jason Bean. I mean, he has been great game yesterday as well. Great game, I should say. This won't come out on Friday, but we're recording this on a Friday. So great last preseason game. He has looked electric, not just throwing the football, but also his running ability as well, Elijah. And look, I don't know if he's going to beat Sam Ehlinger for that third quarterback position, but I do hope the Colts keep him. I hope they keep him around because he has definitely proven that he has something there.
Yeah. And he's a guy that, again, he's got that little caveat, and I love players with this, that has the quarterback / wide receiver, which means that there's a lot you can do with a guy who can play both of those positions, who has really good running ability, really good throwing ability, and good hands. There's a lot you can do, and with a mind like Shane Steichen's offense, I really would love to see what he could do with a guy like Jason Bean. And again, you want a guy, when you're backup quarterback, you really want a guy with a similar play style to your main quarterback. Obviously, Joe Flacco, nothing alike to Anthony Richardson play style, but he was there and he's available. But I think if you're going to talk about a guy who's going to be able to be in this, I really like Jason Bean a lot. And again, you're starting over with him as opposed to Sam Ehlinger, who is on the last year of his deal. Jason Bean, you get whatever you want with him, and you're getting him as an undrafted. So cap hit wise is way smaller. Not that Sam Ehlinger is like a huge cap hit, but it's something to consider. We want more than the $25 million that we're not going to spend in our cap space.
Right. Absolutely. And again, who knows what happens next year at the backup quarterback position, because Joe Flacco's on a 1-year deal. Sam Ehlinger's deal is going to expire. So that could be a wide open competition for Jason Bean to potentially go in there and compete with whoever the Colts bring in, or bring back, I should say, even. So that's going to be an interesting one, but I'm definitely intrigued by what he's shown this preseason. And like you said, I think there's some talent there that Shane Steichen can tap into, and I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like, moving forward. And maybe the Colts have found something with this young kid, Jason Bean. All right, let's move on to another one. And we have two players in a row, Elijah, that we're going to talk about that you could probably classify it as kind of like redemption arcs in certain ways, or comeback stories, if you want to, phrase it that way. The first guy I think is a guy that, obviously when you think of last season, how it ended, you talk about Tyler Goodson a lot, like the drop pass or the bad pass, however you view it. Tyler Goodson was the main focus of that play. And so far, Elijah, I know, like he said, it's only been preseason, but every time Tyler Goodson has gotten an opportunity, he has shown ability. And I even thought he showed ability last year as a runner. Obviously, he was behind Zach Moss and even Trey Sermon, but he showed some ability as kind of a different type of back than maybe what the Colts have currently on their roster. And I'm just intrigued to see kind of what he looks like, because he looked really good so far through the 3 games in preseason and even through, training camp and stuff like that. I think Tyler Goodson could potentially have a role in this offense.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And the run that really comes to mind, because you got a good offensive line. So, and even the depth of the offensive line, when they're not playing their starters, they're still playing an above average backup offensive line. So to get good runs is one thing, especially if you're running like inside zones. But one thing that really stuck out to me about Tyler Goodson last weekend specifically was that drive against the Arizona Cardinals, where it was stuffed at the line and immediately was able to navigate, bounce, and go around and get the touchdown. I really like a guy with good ball carrier vision, and I think that that's something that the Colts offense needs, because again, you can get the 2 or 3 yard run up the middle, but if you got a guy who's got good ball carrier vision and the explosive acceleration that I think Tyler Goodson has shown so far, that translates even against starters in the defense. So I like Tyler Goodson a lot. He's been one of my favorites to watch so far in this preseason. And again, you're talking about redemption stories. This is a guy who literally was getting death threats a year ago, or not even like 6 months ago. And to a guy to be able to have this and be able to potentially play a huge role in this offense, whether that's in like the pistol, or whether that's in kind of one of the more exciting. Again, you're talking about a Shane Steichen style offense that really has a lot of RPOs and a lot of movement. To have a guy like Goodson and his explosiveness, I think could be really cool and fun to watch.
Yeah, and like I said, I think he's just kind of a different type of back, because, even like Trey Sermon, he's more that between the tackles type of runner. But I just feel like he's more Tyler Goodson, he's more shifty. Like, he's that type of back that, like, he may not be as good between the tackles. He's not as big as Trey Sermon, but, like, you get him the ball in space, and he can make some good things happen. Like you said, he's got really good vision. I think he can do some really, really good things. And I think that's something that Shane Steichen will use. I mean, for sure. I mean, you have him and Evan Hall, who definitely, and people will laugh at this, but they can catch out of the backfield, and they can do some stuff, and they can, really help with the mismatch, especially with Anthony Richardson there. Like, I just think it adds another element to your offense, and Tyler Goodson can be a part of that solution moving forward. So, yeah, definitely a guy that I'm looking forward to having a really good season this year and kind of a redemption story making up for how last season ended. Another guy, and this isn't really a redemption story with the Colts, just more of a career sort of potential redemption sort of thing here, comeback story, if you will. Let's talk about Laquan Treadwell a little bit. He has had a really, really solid preseason so far. I mean, this is a guy that signed late, into camp, and so far through the preseason, Elijah, he has looked very good. He's been leading receiver the last number of games.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your thoughts on Laquan Treadwell, and could he potentially push for a roster spot even?
I think more than push for a roster spot, I would love to see Laquan Treadwell. And I think that he's got that really good route, but not only that, but the catches that he's made some really good catches in traffic, really good come down with the ball ability. And again, this is a guy who honestly I forgot about. Like I hadn't even thought of Laquan Treadwell in like a couple of years. And now to look at this and be like, oh my gosh, this guy, that's the same guy. To be able to have like a fresh take on him and be like, okay, this is actually a guy who at one point was evaluated as a first round wide receiver. But now you're looking at him, you're like, man, this is a position that the Colts have a lot of depth in, but how can you justify letting him go or letting him walk? And I think that you can always have more guys like this. I mean, he's just very consistent so far in the preseason. In the preseason, sometimes you get wide receivers that can just run wild because you're running up against second, third, fourth string defensive backs. But what I've seen from him is the ability to come down with the ball, and it's been really, really exciting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. I'm intrigued. I don't know if he's going to make the roster because, like you said, I mean, it's a really deep wide receiver group with this Indianapolis Colts wide receiver room, but we'll see. I mean, he's certainly done himself some favors for sure. I mean, if you would ask us when he got signed, is he going to make the final 53 man? We would have said no. But he's at least done himself some favors to be in consideration for that, which is definitely a big thing. So good preseason for Laquan Treadwell. Talk about another guy that nobody expected to come in, but I thought had a really, really good preseason. Dalton Tucker, the guard. I mean, who would have thought out of any of the interior offensive linemen, we'd be talking about Dalton Tucker, but here we are having great games that, primarily played right guard. I know he played a little bit of left last night in the final preseason game, but I think Dalton Tucker's looked pretty good so far, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, all the attention was on Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonzalez, especially after the rounds 3 and 4 picks. And you don't really think about the other guys. But the Colts let go of center Jack Anderson. Now Danny Pinner's on the fence, potentially being on the outside looking in. And Dalton Tucker's really made a name for himself. He's going to make it really difficult for the Colts to have any sort of idea of cutting him. And again, you're talking about a really good offensive line. And really good offensive lines have depth beyond your starters. And I think that Dalton Tucker has made a name for himself to potentially be in that conversation of either backup guard or just to be there for depth. Because again, it looks like 2 years ago at the Indianapolis Colts, this offensive line was beat to crap. Like they had nothing. And Matt Ryan, obviously not quarterback of the future for the Colts, but definitely was struggling because had no time to throw the football because of the amount of injuries. And I think you get a guy like Dalton Tucker on the field and at least keep him on the Indianapolis Colts. And I really like what he's going to be able to do and like what the depth that he would provide for this team.
Yeah, I mean, you always need depth, especially just with 17 games, the attrition of the NFL. Odds are at least one or not even more than that. Your offensive linemen, they get banged up. Like, it just happens. That's just part of the game. So you need some quality depth in there. Again, Dalton Tucker wasn't necessarily playing against the ones, but he looked solid enough where I think he potentially earned some roster consideration, especially considering, obviously Wesley French on IR and, Tanner Bortolini, who knows if he's going to be ready for the season. So you're going to need some more of that depth in there. And he's been out of all the other guards that you've really played. He's been the guy that stood out the most. I mean, Josh Sills does not look good. He got waived. You have Mike Penisuik, but like, who else do you really have on an interior right now that's healthy as a backup? And I think that's really the biggest thing for me is like, I just think you need more depth in there. So I think he definitely could factor in and be a kid who could play some quality, backup snaps if needed. And just provide some quality depth in there. So really intrigued about him, and great to see him have a really good preseason because nobody expected that.
No, I think he was a name that a lot of people had written off or just was kind of like, he's there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times you see guys like that. They're like, he's there. He's just trying his best, but he's been good. I really liked what I've seen from him.
Absolutely.
We just want to remind you guys that this episode is presented by PrizePicks. Be sure to go visit prizepicks.com today. Use their app, and when you sign up, use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match.
Well, guys, with football season finally getting back into the swing of things, first off, we rejoice, but also, guys, when it comes to PrizePicks, this is going to be a great way for you guys, especially, to check out some of the stuff that PrizePicks has, right? So, for example, when you go into the PrizePicks app, I know one for me that I view as just pretty much stealing easy money at this point is the Jonathan Taylor week 1 against the Houston Texans line right now for yards for that game. Right now, the line sits at 75.5 rushing yards. And obviously, if you remember from that final game of the season, against the Houston Texans at Lucas Oil, actually, in that winner-go-home scenario. Even though the Indianapolis Colts lost that game, Jonathan Taylor went absolutely off in that game, right? He had nearly 200 yards rushing in that game on 30 attempts, averaged over 6 yards per carry, and had a rushing touchdown as well. And on a whole, the average in the 6 games that Jonathan Taylor has played against the Houston Texans, he's averaged 135 yards per game, right? So the fact that PrizePicks has that number right now so low, in my opinion, for Jonathan Taylor, I think that's something where you clearly have to take the over for him because he has never had a game under 83 yards rushing in his 6 total career games against the Houston Texans. So I think that's one, guys, that you definitely should consider if you're on PrizePicks, and definitely would encourage you to hit the over on that. No question about that. One that's also interesting as I was kind of looking through the stuff for the Indianapolis Colts was Anthony Richardson against the Houston Texans as well. Average is set right now for 208.5 passing yards in that game. And that one's kind of interesting to me because I do think Anthony Richardson can clearly do that, but I'm interested to see kind of how his legs factor into that when it comes to, the total yardage, right? Because I could see Anthony Richardson passing for over 200 yards, but I could also see him passing for right around there and also rushing for 50 plus, right? So that's something you definitely have to consider. So if you're looking specifically for the Colts stuff, that's definitely something you guys should check out. But if you're looking for, like me, more NFL stuff, there's all sorts of stats and stuff that you can check out and make your picks for sure. No question in my mind. And there's definitely guys that are very consistent, like Jonathan Taylor against the Houston Texans, that you really feel like you can probably feel pretty good about overall, right? And there's some other ones where you're like, I don't know if I would take the over on that. I don't know if I would pick them to hit that margin, right? So, guys, be sure to go check out all that stuff on PrizePicks. It's only a couple examples. There's all the different odds that you could hope for when it comes to that for PrizePicks. So I encourage you guys to go check that out, but definitely excited for this season, and hopefully you guys will be following along with us and everything with PrizePicks and what they do.
All right, let's switch it over to the defensive side of things. So we have 3 players on the defensive side and then a special teams player that we'll add as well. The first guy is a player that I liked last year. The Colts obviously loved him last year, and he had a couple plays last year, but this preseason, he has been absolutely lighting it up. That is Isaiah Land. Let's talk about Isaiah Land for a second, because he, especially the last couple games, he has just been absolutely wrecking opposing offenses. He has just been a guy that's been consistently back there. And this is a position as well, Elijah, where you look at it and you say, this is a very deep position group, but Isaiah Land very well may have played himself onto this roster with how well he looked in the preseason.
Yeah, and this is a guy who was signed by the Cowboys as an undrafted free agent and then waived almost immediately. So he's still only 24 years old with technically 2 years of experience, but really only one full year of experience. And again, this is a guy that he's making the conversation hard. I think this is what you want to see. You want to see guys that make a name for themselves. And Isaiah Land, again, coming out of the Cowboys, signed with the Colts. On August 30th. So he didn't even make it off waivers, but he's had some really good plays in this preseason and some really good tackles. That's one thing I really like to see from him is his ability to tackle and ability to bring a guy down. And that's what you want. A lot of times you see guys who are either good in coverage or good in tackles, but I've liked what I've seen as far as his pursuit goes, and I've liked what I've seen as far as his ability to tackle and come down and not get pushed around or anything.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got some good size too. So definitely think Isaiah Land could be a guy that could factor in if needed. You know, you do have a lot of depth in there, but obviously with Samson Ebukam out for the year, most likely it opens the door for a guy like Isaiah Land to potentially make this roster. And so I'm intrigued with him.
Yeah, 6'4". Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say 6'4", 235. He's not a small dude by any means, but he's a guy who's really lean and fit, and a guy who can either be on the line with Leatu Latu, like opposite of him, or with Kwity Paye. I think it's a good field for sure.
Absolutely. And I think he was a pretty athletic guy as well coming out of college. He was pretty high up there with his athletic score. I don't have it right in front of me, but he's another kid who I definitely, you kind of know the profile of what the Colts are looking for, and he fits that profile from an athletic standpoint. So definitely a great one. I mentioned Tav Bryan, how he may not be on the roster. I think this player in particular might be a reason why. That is Adi Tomiwa Adebaware. Obviously the Colts' 4th round pick, I believe, last year. Didn't really see the field a whole lot his rookie season, but Adi Tomiwa has been very, very good. Him and Isaiah Land, honestly, on the defensive line, they've been the two guys that have stood out to me, for some of these reserve guys. They've been absolutely killing it so far. Adi Tomiwa, you can clearly see the improvement from year 1 to year 2 with him, and you're really excited about him because, he's slightly a hair undersized, but he is extremely athletic as well. And he's a kid that, yes, he's not, the 6'5", 315 type of, player at the 3 tech. He's not DeForest Buckner size. I know Buckner's not quite that big, but he's not DeForest Buckner size, but he doesn't need to be Elijah. He's very, very athletic, and he's a kid that I think can provide some juice, getting after the quarterback, because he showed that in the preseason, and obviously we saw what he did at Northwestern as well. So talk to me about Adi Tomiwa, what you've seen from him this preseason, and why he might kind of slide in as that backup 3 tech to DeForest Buckner this year.
Yeah, I really liked what I've seen from him, especially his speed and his finesse moves. I've really liked his ability to just push around an offensive line. And again, you're talking about 3 of the biggest defensive tackles in football with Grover Stewart, DeForest Buckner, and Roquan Davis just towering over guys. So you don't need to have guys that are again more towers. Sometimes it's good to have that guy who's maybe a slight undersized, but is able to get in between tackles and get in between guards and really be able to infiltrate that backfield. And I think that's what he's going to be able to do. And I'm really excited to see. I hope that he stays, and I hope that they're able to do it. And I think that's going to be the reason that Tav Bryan doesn't make it on this roster, is because he's had such a good preseason this year.
Absolutely. And again, he's like 6'2", but he's 285. So he's a slight undersized for that position, but still he's not that small, honestly, just a little bit short especially when you compare him to DeForest Buckner and Raekwon Davis. But really excited to see. Maybe there are certain packages where you see him in. I'm not sure exactly, but I feel like if you need him to step up, he will. And I'm really excited to see his progress from year 1 to year 2 and it translate to the field as well, which is really exciting. All right, we have one more player we want to talk about on the defensive side of things. That is Micah Abraham, the Indianapolis Colts 6th round pick this year. He has been absolutely, really, I would say he's blown away some expectations this year. I know it's a kid that you're like, he's not the most athletic kid in the world, at least from an RAS standpoint, but he was so productive in college at Marshall. Incredibly productive. So talk to me about Micah Abraham. We've seen him make some plays in the preseason so far. And I think a kid that maybe some of us were like, is he going to make the roster too? He's definitely made some consideration for that.
For sure. Yeah, Micah Abraham has been on my list from day one. I've watched the highlights as soon as they drafted him. and really just fell in love with his ability to press coverage. And that's something that the Colts have struggled with historically. You've got Kenny Moore, who's good in press coverage, but other than that, they don't have a guy who's really able to stay up on someone, especially in those short routes and the crossers and kind of some of those really quick movement routes. But Micah Abraham was the lowest drafted Colts player in the RAS department in 3 years at I believe a 5.6, if I remember correctly. So very, very low. But his speed is good and his hands are good and his ability to stay and really the IQ is, I think, why the Colts drafted this guy, is because he's able to see the play as it's happening and really stay right up on someone. And again, this is a division that wide receiver wise only got better. You've got Stephon Diggs now on the Texans. You've got Tank Dell and Nico Collins all healthy on the Texans right now. And then you look over at the Titans, and I think this is going to be where Micah Abraham, if he makes it on and is able to stay on the field or a roster spot as a starter, I think that you look at the Tennessee Titans, this is where I think that he would succeed, is some of those older guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley, some of those older guys who maybe aren't as fast as far as just acceleration, just off the gate speed, but some of those guys who do the finesse moves, Micah Abraham, guys like that, are really, really good in those specific situations, and it's going to limit what the Tennessee Titans are going to be able to do. And again, you got to think about that. It's all strategy when you're talking about the division, and this is one of the toughest divisions in football, and it's only gotten better so far this offseason. I think Micah Abraham, again, really shows a lot of promise, and rookie DBs don't often have you don't see them often, like off the bat, week one or, rookie seasons be really good. Some, maybe this isn't even for this year, but I think Micah Abraham definitely has competed and definitely earned his spot, I believe, on this roster.
Yeah. And also you just need a backup slot guy. Like you don't really have that right now. And Micah Abraham, I think, could do that. I think he could definitely be that guy that if Kenny Moore needs, some time, like Micah Abraham could slide in there and play some good slot for you, because we know like Kenny Moore is so valuable to what this Colts defense does.
Sure.
And if you don't have anybody that can at least play competent slot, then you're going to be in a world of trouble if you're the Colts, especially if Kenny Moore gets banged up at all. It's going to be an issue. So maybe Micah Abraham can project in there. Obviously, he's a bit undersized, so maybe that does project well in the slot a little bit better. And like you said, the speed's obviously there as well. So I'm intrigued about that. And I think the last guy we got to talk about is so somehow we're talking about this kicker, Spencer Schrader. But after what he did against the Cincinnati Bengals, where he nailed that 50-plus yarder, probably could have been good, honestly, from 60 yards.
Every bit
nailed it. He nailed it. And with the Matt Gay stuff, again, like hopefully Matt Gay is good. We don't have to worry about it. But Spencer Schrader, I mean, he's looked good, man. He's looked good. So maybe the Colts keep him around. And if situation continues to be the way it was in the preseason for Matt Gay, maybe then. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
We came from, we were spoiled rotten for years, having the all-time leading scorer and Adam Vinatieri for 15 years on the Indianapolis Colts. We were spoiled. Now we have to look at where are we at now? Because then we had Rodrigo Blankenship, really good one season, and then it fell off. And I think that like there was then kind of going around trying to figure out what we were going to do. And then you look at, this is the end all, right? This is our big free agent signing last year was Matt Gay, and I think that everyone was really excited. He showed up and had some really good clutch kicks last season. Then obviously you start to warrant concern when your 50-plus yard average, when your 50-plus yard percentage is under average. So it's 61%. The average is 69%. So you start to look at that last season. You're like, hey, man, is this the guy? And then obviously the 3 straight misses in preseason. And then you look at a guy like Spencer Schrader, who comes in, starts nailing these in practice, and then obviously in game yesterday. I think the conversation has to be had. And I'm not saying I'm going for an old-fashioned like shoot 'em out kickoff or kick out between these two, but I am saying that like you're talking about the second highest paid kicker in the NFL right now. Behind only third, Evan McPherson and Justin Tucker. But you're talking about the third highest, and he's not even able to make 3 in a row. And again, I know he said that he had a different holder and all that stuff, but you're getting paid a lot of money, and I would think that you'd be able to make a 44-yard field goal, even if that football's on its belly.
Right, exactly. So, well, guys, let us know your thoughts overall on some players who we believe won the preseason. Is there anybody else you might have added as well? Elijah, I want to thank you for coming on, man. It was a good time. We'll definitely have to do it again soon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, guys, be sure to go subscribe over there. Elijah, I guess, where can people find you, find your YouTube stuff, find you everywhere that you are?
Yeah, so YouTube is at Sports Talk Indy. That's INDY. And then I'm over there on X as well at Elijah_Shepherd.
Awesome. Sounds good. Guys, go subscribe to him. Go follow him on Twitter, X, whatever you call it. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.
Go Colts.